Good morning, everybody. Today, I'd like to talk about a whole bunch of tactics, mobile tactics, that is, or more specifically, multi-channel, multi-platform tactics. How some of them are good, a few are bad, and seek to get to the core principles. Then we use those principles across the whole scope of a project, from conception to maintenance, to get better outcomes faster, cheaper, and with fewer bugs, we hope. The first thing, something didn't work. First thing I want to talk about is responsive design and tell you how you're probably doing it wrong, but also that it's a terrific idea, and if you believe in it, you're probably halfway to being really effective. First, I think it's always critical to know where things come from. Responsive design is really just a term invented recently by Ethan Marcotte to encompass some current trends. It reminded me right away of fluid design from a few years back. But then I cast my mind back further and remember thinking the same thing in that era, when CSS Zen Garden became big. That this was cool stuff, but not conceptually different than what we'd been doing for years. Many of us did percentage tables and frame sets, God help us, from around 1997 in ways that are very, very similar to what's going on today with multi-screen design. As soon as CSS came around, we changed to scaling type and used background images in weird ways to account for very, very different screen sizes on just desktop and early laptop computers. I even applied for a patent on a funny button made of tables and filled with styles so we could feed it from data stores and it would resize depending on the content and the interface. It wasn't granted, but we were able to do great work with these under the same conceptual framework long before CSS media queries. I do get a little annoyed by those who overly promote any of these trends as brand new thinking. But even when it's an overhyped trend, many of these do a service to the community. Trends in design, development, and processes sometimes communicate really good principles. Responsive web design is very good in this sense, as long as it gets everyone away from the one-size, pixel-perfect designs, which isn't quite happening yet. The new Dreamweaver, for example, has this very rigid framework where you pick a few sizes to be responsive to. Not right, but okay, and certainly better than it was. The biggest tactical problem, really, is that this is so very focused on the client side. Especially for mobile, this is awful. You can't send giant images and scads of JavaScript over to make your page physically fit a feature phone screen. It often won't even bother to render. I can go on and on about how it won't work or why, but take my word, people who live outside of Lower Manhattan or downtown San Francisco, data connections matter. Half of them carry feature phones, still, even in the US. If you use device detection, a tool like Referral, and let it send the right content to the client, this solves everything with much the same principles of design. Your same device classes even work. You just push the intelligence back a layer and make it more reliable. Which might sound familiar. Yes, RES, or RESS, I never know how to say it, is this concept, also with a new name. Buzzwords do their job. Trying to explain device detection was a total uphill battle for me until quite recently, because RES is one of those buzzwords that's starting to work. It's being treated a bit like early Ajax, where everyone is trying to copy the implementations, but eventually it's getting to principles. And one of the principles to me is that it's not just about the web. Many applications, and all web services, are about connected data access. The same principles apply here, and smart companies are using platform-agnostic content strategies very successfully right now. They're doing it because they looked at their business and their competitors, saw problems, and reacted to them. Not because they wanted to implement the best cool new technology, but because they wanted to remain relevant in their businesses, remain competitive, and become more efficient and nimble. To be successful in this multi-platform world, you have to, briefly, ignore the platforms and build products for your business and your customers. When you sit down and decide to start building for mobile, the first thing you probably say is stuff like, which platform do I launch on first? I have to give this answer quite a bit in some detail. I'll skip most of that detail for now, but the short answer usually is a website for mobile and desktop. Briefly, because it offers universal access. As a method of discovery and linking, it provides a gateway to other products. There's essentially no barrier to pushing updates. You can fix and revise easily. And most importantly, analytics. You get great data on who is using your site and how. But even that's going to leave you some questions or assumptions. What platform am I targeting on the web? And from experience and analysis, I say you choose trends, maybe analytics and familiarity. But this is all too often terrible because statistics lie. These are two perfectly functional iPod Touches that I own. I use them for tests a lot, but you might ask, why do I need two? Because the one on the left, I guess here, only runs iOS 3.2. No better than that. Two major versions behind the current, and three behind what a lot of us have. I had to buy the newer one because developers and marketing managers get bad information and only build for the newest version of iOS. People choose easy paths, even if that's at its core a lie. We can see from all the buzz, the marketing, and the occasional stats like this chart, all iOS devices are the same, and that darn Android is confusing what with the fragmentation. Lies, or maybe statistical truth, that distort the reality of a situation about, say, how fragmented Android OS adoption is compared to iOS do not help, not just in a journalistic integrity manner, but because they make you believe lies about the world which make you take unproductive courses of action. I work in a lot of monocultures. The most common is the 100% iOS shop, not just the cool designers, but developers. I've seen many places where there are 0 devices other than an iPhone, and usually everyone has to go out and get the latest model. And everyone reads the same tech blogs, and everyone sees the same data. But their samples are wrong. Their shop is not representative of the city, their city is not representative of the country, and the US is not the world. You may also see we all get blind spots for the competition. If you walk through an airport and see only iPhones, I took a survey for a few weeks while traveling and encountered the normal regional penetration rates of all devices just by looking around and writing down what I saw. And one of the biggest pitfalls is even if you look at real analytical data, they often are wrong on first glance. Look closer at the raw data. See that 37% say that's no data, which your analytics team discards. That's mobile devices that disregard your scripts or clear pixels and are not being recorded. If you see any figures that are massively out of whack with regional trends, you're usually wrong. In fact, I'll say 100% of the time I've encountered figures like that chart a couple pages ago, where 85% of the visitors are from one mobile platform. It's an error, maybe an insidious one that's hard to find. But you should be able to look at the data and know there's little or no chance this is true. Of the last dozen or so apps I've worked on for tech startups or big corporations, exactly one has been targeted first to iOS. Not because the team all carries Android and wanted to be contrarian, but because they looked at actual stats. They look at good, well-run analytics from the existing products, or specifically launch their mobile product on the web first. They check market share in the region and for the audience they're launching on. And let me be clear, this is out there. This is not something I push for. Business owners are starting to get the idea of serving the customer and making informed decisions based on real evidence. Forget Android. Platforms like Windows Phone are growing in development manager mindshare and are either being developed or are on roadmaps for the next 6 to 12 months. If you design based on perception, love, religion, or hearsay, if you build for one platform then expect to sort of stretch it to fit others, you're missing opportunities. And let me talk about why this matters. Even setting aside rates of use of alternative OSs today, I won't mention half the smartphones in the world still run Symbian, or that BlackBerry still sells well in many markets, or that more people subscribe to SMS news alerts on their smartphones than there are TVs in the whole world. Not worry about those. Instead, I'll ask, who thinks ubiquitous computing is more or less here? And that essentially everyone in the world in the next decade or two is going to have access to a network-connected device. When you start looking at the market, you forget the question of whether it'll be an iPhone. Will it even be a handset-sized device for everybody? Will it be a touch device? Will it even be portable? The iPhone is not yet 6 years old, and the Internet is decades old. We can't predict 18 months from now, much less 5 years. Do you want to be playing catch-up? For the last few weeks, I've been working on a product related to smartphone users in Africa. They don't really have many now, so it's early, and we're working on future states. One platform I'm designing for, desktop PCs. As the continent becomes more connected, some of the people with smartphone purchasing power will presumably be information workers. They'll start having computers at their desks. Probably. But I don't much care if I'm wrong, because I'm using things like connected TVs, or kids with connected portable game consoles, or even just desktops with developing world's new information workers as stakes in the ground. Something to gather the ideas and get basic behaviors. The design itself of any product has to start at a much higher level. Consider why it is needed more than how. You have to get the user tasks agnostic of technology solutions, much less of platforms. When you consider interfaces, you have to include voice and SMS and printed posters explaining it, and things that fall outside the system so are going to get written by end users on Post-it notes. But we are going to design to lots of different sizes. This chart, by the way, is real. This is, I think, just the new Android devices from the first quarter of this year or something, with no repeats, no stretching, no fun to make it all fit and be a prettier chart, which is why it looks like a mess. And it's not pixel dimensions, but actual sizes. Note all those aspect ratios and the wildly different size between tablets and handsets. So why do I care about screen size? What about resolution? Well, who cares? Your finger can't be measured in pixels. I have no rulers graduated in pixels, and your eyeballs, much to your surprise, see photons, not pixels. Once you get past the wonderment of your new sharp display, it doesn't really matter, per se. What matters is physical size and distance from the device for viewing. For touch, though, just size. This is so important that I've actually stopped carrying random rulers around even, and I certainly don't measure anything directly on the computer, and made up a tool for measuring directly on phone screens. Device-independent pixels are okay, but just okay. I say it's conceptually, philosophically, a cheat for the reality challenged. And there are serious pitfalls with inconsistent use and, for the web, communications of scale ratios. One that annoys me most is Apple calls their DIPs, or device-independent pixels, or a DIP, they call them points. But a point is a real and useful unit of measuring type. Apple's point is nowhere near this size, which makes promulgating standards for somebody like me a total pain. Previously, every OS there was supported physical measurement sizes at some level. Even if you have to do the tedious math to convert to the iOS's DIPs only thing, because even Android supports other measures, do make common specifications in real sizes based on users and their needs. M's, as an aside, are great. You may call this an EM because it's in the new HTML standard, but it's pronounced M. Go look it up. The baseline size is 16 point, but you can change that. Use any other physical sizes if you want specific sizes as well. Skip cheats and prayers for automatic scaling. As much as you can, start designing for real scales for the real world. The responsive principle in this case is still very solid, especially when you use REST and device detection to load the right content from the server instead. Now we can extend it a level. You also need to design your features for the way people use and expect to use their products. This is a sample chunk of a typical IA document, or you may call it a user flow or task model or something. It's the way the user does flow from one screen to another through a system. There's a requirement for email in the mobile app. So, of course, we put in an email page and a confirmation page, and probably needs an error page and so on. Easy, the default way you do things. But smartphones have email built in. Sure, desktops do too, but they're stupid. They forget who you are, launch the wrong email client, forget the context, and can't pass much info, make it hard to go back to where you came from. Mobile users expect this behavior, though, instead. And mobiles are smarter than you even give them credit for. They remember you. They pass the state between services. You don't even always have to code in what the action is precisely, email or SMS. You can just put a share icon in your app, and sometimes into a website. Users expect some variant of this now. Users get to pick, depending on the platform, what they want to do with the information. So you can meet that same feature with a lot less code, a lot less to test and go wrong, and you can better meet the expectations of the end users. And it's not just email. You can drop maps and directions and local weather and many other features from your design by offering them directly as links to all these other services. Believe in mobile. It has these capabilities, this intelligence, and this contextual awareness. But do use those only on mobile. Use the right features on the right platforms. Do different things on desktops or kiosks or on phone IVR systems. I think you can break down the concept of a design in this order. Principles at the highest level, from which you can derive applicable patterns, from which you can make templates specific to your product, and then build pages or screens or views or states with the actual data and interfaces. The state of responsive design and all the related concepts I've been discussing today is at the page or template level. Maybe, if lucky, it goes up to patterns. We need to move the discussion to principles, to designing architectural solutions for each platform. Not just generally, I mean a solution for your particular product. We need to extend these principles to items that are not just served at the moment, but to the way we design and build packaged products, the way we use these for building applications. Now, I'm sure every project you've been on declares there's no time, or doesn't even have the time to declare anything and just shortcuts process by default. I know this because I've been on it myself dozens and dozens of times. Someone dreams up a few requirements, someone else expands them with the goal of making it as fast as possible, and thus is born a project based on those comfortable assumptions of platforms. And each requirement becomes a feature, and each feature becomes a line in a spreadsheet or a card on the wall. And you end up with hundreds of requirements, even for simple one-off projects. If anyone's happy with the way this works, I'd be surprised. But how do we solve this? Well, we step back from the regular process for just a minute. Web design made us all lazy, and states don't exist anymore. It's all pages, to the point it's hard to find even a quick and easy prototype tool that supports something as simple as a pop-up or accordion. So apps get developed that are nothing but pages swiping to other pages. For starters, you can't start like this. First, ask questions. Ask your project team. As the UX guy, I'm often brought in quite early and have an almost built-in chance of success. But if you're a development manager or a BA or a technical architect, and you get a vague one-line project description that you're required to estimate or expand on, just go find the product owner and ask what they mean. I have a formal questionnaire, and ideally do these workshops with the entire team for at least half a day, but I've also gotten by with SurveyMonkey or simply sending out questions carefully worded by email to the whole team. You may also notice these root questions I'm asking, at least the principles behind them, are not dissimilar from concepts you may well know from product development or service design or any number of other fields. I find these to be nice proof that principles are easily shared. So everyone on the project can work well together and should agree we need this information. Note that I didn't ask what platform they use, or how we'll build it, or anything along the lines of technical feasibility. In fact, we don't get to that decision point at all. Well, yet. From this, what we do get is principles and measurable goals and objectives. By the way, don't forget to build in the analytics or whatever other tools are needed to prove the goals are met. Don't keep these objectives secret. Collaborate on development of them, not software development. Share them with the team. Get everyone to sign off on them, and then keep sharing. Include them in the front of the documents that you deliver. Stick them on the walls of team rooms. As new team members arrive, they have a chance to know why the project exists and won't just write code in a vacuum. This can be a great way to be agile, at least with a small a. When a designer sketches a solution or a gap is discovered by the team, the developer has a much better chance of understanding and coming up with a solution that fits the rest of the product on their own. Because what we're all doing is design. And we're going to design a system solution, not a project, but a system, which will touch whichever interfaces it needs to. Design gets a lot of people hung up. In the general world, the word design without context means interior decorator more than anything. To too many technology folks, it means a job like mine appears to be, all about making the presentation layer pretty. But it's not. Look closely what a good software team does before they get to work, or what a good DBA spends 90% of his time doing. It's not writing code, it's designing. Sometimes it's explicitly called that. There's a software design phase when I am generally drawing my process diagrams. And I do think it should be called design a lot more. Okay, now that's out of the way. Once you have principles, you should start design, which clearly now I mean with the whole project team. My ideal, again, is to sit down in a room with everyone, bring up the principles, the original concept, and talk about what can be done. This freaks out a lot of development teams, most I'd say, much more often than not, so much so they don't even know what I mean and refuse to entertain the process. They insist, you give me the design and I'll estimate. The problem is an assumption, not just that they cannot make decisions, but that everything is very ordered, that we have a platform, usually default like desktop web, so all we have to do is take the requirements and make pages that meet the requirements. And then development tells you how hard it is to do each page. But that's not just wrong, it's backwards. We need to instead take the principles, objectives, and any other dreamy ideas for the product and put them all out there. With the likely feature and technically possible on any platform, put it up on the wall, or put it in the line of the spreadsheet, or put a post-it note on the side of your desk. You're designing not a website, but a technical product. So think about the services, the underlying systems, and the touch points. When you start to branch the design to platforms, which does happen, interesting things will occur. And they aren't about reducing the content for mobile or other constrained interfaces. They're about using the capabilities I discussed a few minutes ago. It's common to say that mobile is limited compared to desktop because it's smaller, harder to type on, and so forth. I like to say mobile is better because of the sensors and the general focus on the user and identity and network connectivity. But let's say instead, every platform has its strengths. Little problem there. At this phase, you're making wireframes, like you're used to, and other design specifications, and functional requirement documents. So design refilters to decide what cannot and should not be in a particular platform, which does happen. Branches to make an executable architecture or flow document, and optimizes the interactions and interfaces for the platform. Development is planning to decide for each platform what is feasible, how it will be built, and how long it will take. But you might think I've skipped how you decide big issues like what platforms are first. It might not be such a simple decision as web, then app for OS that visits us the most. This is often what I like to call an organic decision. The design itself should lead you. I've been working lately on a project that's a very simple example. It's got no web interface because it's about being used places like down a mine shaft. Seriously, miles underground. Network connection at the moment of use doesn't matter because it's not available. So local storage rules the day. So it's going to continue to be a CD, paper catalog, a desktop website for use back in the office that we already had, and a mobile app. But no mobile website. As it turns out, for example, on this project, we couldn't make the decision without some design. It couldn't be done at the corporate planning team level, at the finance level, at the steering committee. IT PMs and technical architects couldn't make it. We had to actually sketch out what all the interfaces available were and start exploring even technical needs like where the network linkages were before we realized they weren't available in some cases. If you need to build products for your company and your users, the driving force has to be making it useful for them in their context. As you do this, some buzzword-worthy principles I haven't mentioned yet will fall by the wayside. I increasingly say you cannot consider graceful degradation or progressive enhancement to be true, except in very specific domains, like does it support this JavaScript function. You cannot cut down features for the mobile, for example. If it's needed for the user, and there's no step where you say, well, what goes on this screen because it is small. Decisions on features and behaviors are so much higher level, you can simply avoid these pitfalls. When you're considering how to fulfill the features needed on each platform in the most native way, it's hard to say one is better or worse, or that one is a degraded experience. And you can't, therefore, enhance progressively, moving up the platform chain, but instead provide the best experience for each platform in turn. Implementation is a key part of this whole process, and not just because it's how the product actually gets out to the end users. I mean here, including implementation considerations and implementation team members in the design and evaluation steps. Note that I'm generally going to hesitate throughout this presentation to say development. It's best to raise it up a level and discuss how the product will be built, hosted, released, and maintained in the same breath as how it is designed, marketed, sold, and paid for. This might seem like the same argument I've been making about designing the whole product than designing individual parts, because it is. So how do you implement this for multiple platforms if they're so customized? Well, the same way we did for design, from the top down. First, design. Plan, if that is a word that works better and fits in your process. Ideally, you've been performing software and storage design all along. If not, stop and do that before starting to code presentational screens. Then you build core functions first, long before you build UI. Practice the principles of layered development and build the data stores, backend software, business rules, and all the methods to access these. The first interfaces, ideally to me, will be shared items like email, which will work with every platform. If you have even a glimmer in your eye, much less actual plans like I've been discussing, that this product will expand to other platforms, you cannot bake the software to run it into the first platform's presentation layer or build one-off calls to the data store. You have to build for the future so each platform can use it, even in platforms you haven't considered before. And if you do this remotely correctly, you don't need to predict the future particularly well. So if the philosophical underpinnings or hope for the future won't work for your management chain, how about the efficiency? Building like this is absolutely more efficient use of development resources. If we don't have to touch each bit of code with every bug, for every platform team, for every release, that's obviously great, and the math is self-evident. But think more broadly. how about hardware and configuration efficiency? There should be one data store, not syncing between several, and one service call that everyone shares. Now we're building things once. Even more, data transfer efficiency. Put as much processing on the back end as possible. Put intelligence next to the data stores, or at least on cheap, high-speed pipes nearby instead of sending them over the radio. You just send to the device what is needed. This might remind anyone of the principles I talked about earlier. Anyone of sufficient scale can easily save millions of dollars a year by reducing data transfer alone. That can be a very easy argument to make. Of course, as an aside to this, the app could be faster, there's less security risk on the client side, and so forth. Anyway, then you're ready to build the presentation of individual platform code bases. These should take advantage not just of the UI and interaction differences, but the common service and data framework and the available tools and processes of the client platform. Whenever possible, inherit features or use default functions. I've seen ugly but running complex products built in a day. Apparently, it actually took weeks of software development before this that nobody could see. Individual platforms, I say. How many of you launch at, how many of you launch at more or less the same time your product on several platforms? You do the web, iOS, Android, BlackBerry even. Doesn't juggling all this get out of hand in a big hurry? Well, of course, if you don't plan well. The next step to me in designing a customized experience for the whole product for each platform is making sure your process is designed equally well to take advantage of the unique needs of the product and capabilities of the team. And I don't mean development processes. These ideas are all process agnostic. I've seen the good and bad happen in waterfall, spiral, rational, agile, and several others. So working on the best way to use these constrained resources, I've determined there are three basic ways or methods or manners to engage everyone on a multi-platform product. The first I call serial. You do all the stuff I already said about collaborating on the concept and blueprint design level. Meanwhile, development starts specifying, then building core services. The first platform documentation is finished, development is sent out to build it, you accept it, fix bugs, launch it, see if everyone liked it, then decide that maybe another platform would be good, so go hire another developer. And the new guy fights with the old developers because they're all platform specific, and so much time passes you really want new features, so have to do more design work on the first platform as well as the second one. And maybe if you're lucky, somebody buys you for $1 billion. But mostly, you miss opportunities for more users and get lost in the weeds, confusing your existing user base with inconsistent, irregularly updated applications as the years pass you by. Serial is the default non-process. When an organization fails to specify the platform, because everyone knows it's on the web, and then makes a special project 3 months later to build an iPhone app, that's really just the project continuing with a willy-nilly lack of process, and is where you see these confusingly slow and irregular multi-channel products come from. I think there is a way to make this particular process work, but the way far too many businesses run, with business like external pressures and financing and so forth, the delays between individual products or phases seem to always blow the plan. What I call the parallel path is the typical immediate alternative response, and the standard way to react when the business insists a product has to be released at a specific time. It is the chart that looks good when you say all hands on deck. Usually, after a bad release or two, I can successfully argue for the delay you see here up at the top 2 rows, where we actually take time to plan. This is better covered in some of my other process presentations, like how to integrate Agile and UX. But briefly, since nobody asks, It's the same thing I've been saying here about planning along. There's no arguing if you back, but look at it as there's already planning time baked into all the processes. So if you actually do codified planning and design work in that time frame, it isn't really taking any actual time. Anyway, jumping forward, you see that the UX design, business monitoring, and if you're so lucky, usability research are on each and every track, which leads to two possible outcomes. The core team, those business owners and core BAs and so forth, tries to cover all the bases, totally can't, and development gets by with approval by PowerPoint. Even if not literally taking screenshots of the app and showing them on PowerPoint, anything pretty and shiny that appears to be good is approved, and actual problems get masked. Development makes all tactical decisions as problems comes up, mostly with the intent of making them good enough to pass review. To solve this, maybe for the next release, the core team assigns subordinate product owners, UX people, and so on to each track. But then there are too many subordinates, and they spend so much time solving the problems of their track, they make individualized decisions, and the platforms start to deviate. Either way, the deviation from plan is often very bad, not just in UI consistency, but in a technical sense. Everything gets built as needed, very often to the point that middleware starts having custom variations per platform. Or, and I've seen this, each platform has its own data store, and you're lucky if they sync. The core issue with parallel path is a resource strain. The biggest is on the core team members, the designers, product owners, and lead technical personnel like BAs, who try to provide oversight. But even line developers can be overloaded, not just for the pressure to meet the deadline for their swim lane, but as they or the management starts to see slips and gaps, they may try to fix by coordinating with other teams on their own, which is irregular, takes lots of time, and results in more slips to the original plan. Overall, you always seem to end up with less than you wanted to launch, late, and full of bugs. You'll tend to fall back to the serial mode, platform by platform, as you try to fix each and every one of these. The methodology I've been pushing for a little while, formally, but which has been around obviously for a while, is the staggered approach. To far too many teams, this is shockingly unique, as I keep finding development managers who have never seen anything like it. It seems obvious to me, but this is why I'm talking at it. Resources, software design, business oversight, and UX work hand in hand, both from a process and resource availability point of view. You generally still engage a team per platform, though sometimes you can recycle part or all of a team if they have the capability, and that's the way that your contracts and groups work. But staggered starts mean there are efficiencies, as every subsequent team can learn from the mistakes already made and reuse work already done. Note that the first platform is indeed shared services, as I've been discussing a little while ago. In any case, the highest priority platforms go first, and the risk of them finding errors is entirely counterbalanced by the much, much longer QA time. Usability research and longer acceptance testing can also be implemented in the first platform or two to make sure that we're building the right product and that the end users and the business will be happy with it. These happen very early in the overall implementation cycle, so the general learnings or any change requests can be applied to the others relatively easily. Overall, later platforms should be much easier to implement on, even if they're in 100% new presentational code bases, as the software, architecture, algorithms, content, and much other work is entirely done on the earlier platforms. Not to mention, as I just said, approvals, and there's plenty of time to make changes to the design documents far before there's actual code written. If bugs do make it out to nearly production, they're on lower priority, lower user platforms that can be held, or maybe where you can just live with some small bugs. Naturally, as it is set up, this meets your larger goal of fewer bugs and more output for fewer resources. Tactical implementations are left for each of you to consider in your organization, of course. This works as it's inherently multi-platform. You're no longer fighting anyone on the team or the inherent nature of multi-platform development. It becomes at least passive and may be an asset and a way to prime communications and collaboration between the platform implementation teams. After you launch, you have to live with your products. At least for months, and if not you, then someone is going to have to live with it for years. So one of the best questions I've had in a presentation of a process is how you plan for subsequent releases. Which is a great question because it's another of those core principle things where the answer is complicated, but as its heart fits within the same process. Because it's not just about deliberate second releases, but bug fixes, people change their minds, or even the general concept of continuously improving your product. Not to mention the technical landscape is always changing. So you need to be updating regularly to make most of the new technologies, new platforms, and new user expectations. Remember near the front when I discussed that you can't predict what platforms are next. You need to be planning on this lack of being able to predict things so you aren't caught flat-footed and it takes 18 months to launch a new program. Let's narrow to something you can plan on more than midstream changes or discussions of the whole life cycle and the future of mobile technology. What causes second releases? Well, the same pressures as all those others, unpredictability and product pressures. We can't predict everything, so make guesses and compromises to meet some reasonable expectation of a first launch date. Then we launch it. So you're left with a pile of features, or half of those cards are still on the wall. But you know that's not what gets launched as a second release either. The competitive landscape changes, user feedback is different, or some executive has a good idea. How do you solve for those without it becoming a muddled mess again? The same way you did the original stuff. You stick to your principles. When I talk in detail about the design process, which I usually call design for every screen, a key feature is that the blueprint, that core IA document I discussed earlier, is a target design, meaning a vision for a perfect, fully featured product. None of us expects it to get it anytime soon. So the first releases are sub-variant of that, and we work towards the rest as a goal or target. Story backlogs and other such future feature lists are a less holistic version of the same concept. So the first thing you do is go back to the list and start filling in what makes the most sense. Then add to these by listening to your users. Don't let any one comment or even one type of comment have too much weight. Try to use good science and good math to tell what is really happening. If you get a bad review, even in a major article, don't worry about it unless analytics bear it out and user research explains clearly why it's a problem. On the other hand, if you get all one-star reviews for a key missing feature or that the product's incredibly slow, that's probably your new number one priority to fix. But even if you get 80% one-star reviews, don't panic. Just like I encourage you to stop for a minute when first building the product to decide what it should do, here, take no reactionary moves. If it's not clear, get more data. Analyze. Consider tangential solutions as when you're originally designing. You may find a surge of protest turns out to be a disaffected 1%. The solution then may be more about marketing than product changes. Develop plans. Don't let your bosses, your executives, push you in random directions without understanding why. Consider the consequences of change. Satisfying that loud 1% or even 10% may be the wrong choice if it alienates 80% of your audience. But this does not mean to react slowly. In fact, this process as a whole can be faster than rushing all the time as you move carefully. Your actions end up being measured and efficient. But what if the executives come down, and they are the executives, so you have to listen to them, with a new mandate? Not something like make it more blue, but now you have to sell online after all. Or the customers all demand they be able to comment, even though your previous strategic goal was to integrate with Facebook. These disagree with your goals or design principles. So what do? Well, of course, change your principles. This can even happen during the original launch, during that phase I discussed where you develop your principles, then design to them, though they're most of the time they're much smaller changes. Remember how I said you reach platform technology decisions organically by designing? Well, the same happens here. Sometimes the concept seems good, but details change it. Don't just get a bigger hammer, sweep the gaps under the rug, and certainly don't throw away your principles. Address the change, and then if everyone agrees, change the principles as needed. Then carry out that same use of these goals, objectives, and principles. Distribute the changes to the whole team in the same way, and take a look at the whole product as this light. Say you add that comment button instead of the simple link to Facebook. Is a comment link going to be good enough? Or do you need a comment section or a sidebar? Does it require a whole architectural change because the entire concept of your application has changed? Yes, often these are fairly serious redesigns, but don't let that scare you, as you're going to end up making the right product for your users. Process-wise, I've been asked if the staggered approach still works. I tend to say yes, because the principle is solid. Not the development efficiency principles, though those work, but the product-centric, platform-agnostic principles. If you fix up one for a second release or a bug fix, but not the others, barring bugs unique to a platform, then you're admitting that they can deviate in features. Is this what you want? Do you want to explain to, say, your mom why your phone does something but hers doesn't? Think about the longer-term life cycle. If you choose to launch everything together at first, then you are considering the whole product as one. How does an update a few months later of the iPad app that leaves behind all handsets and the Android tablets serve the single product vision? It depends. It's not a strict rule. Your needs and your internal goals and objectives will tell you, but you must have one plan. Not let it get out of control or be driven by technology needs or whim or reacting to any particular external influence without planning. And when I say there are no hard and fast rules, I do mean it. Don't copy anything I've done. Well, not exactly. Design makes choices based on good principles, develops or uses patterns based on user needs and business goals, and builds solutions based on schedules and business or technology limits. Your process should, likewise, correspond to your organizational culture or that of your clients, your needs as a project team, and the technical or business process limits of how it is integrated into the rest of the organization. Design and implementation processes, just like your product, should always be improving. Not just following trends blindly, but picking up the nugget of a good idea, analyzing it, and applying that when it works for your organization, your process, and your product. Since I keep saying principles, and I've been talking about a series of them for the last hour or so, here's the best I can do to narrow them down to a pocket-sized guide for as our last slide. Be responsive. Actually, be multi-platform, and from the server level, not just the presentation layer. Be native by using device capabilities far more than just reacting to size. Build for physical use. Design to the user's scale using real-world sizes and real-world interactions. Design buildable products that are implemented the way you design and designed in ways that can be implemented. And execute in extensible ways. The core of your product is probably data, so design and build generalized, reusable, maintainable components and services. Now I'm going to take a few moments to look through the question list and see what's good to answer here. Here's a good one. I often get very specific things about technologies, but this is a particularly good one. I'll just read it straight off from Chris. I won't use the last name in case he's trying to be secret. The level of planning and management discipline you are talking about rarely exists in the real world. The reality is customers, and I assume we mean clients and management, want to see something so they do not feel they're tossing money down a hole. And so I'm sad that I apparently didn't communicate that well enough in the slideshow. One of the key things that I'm trying to express here is that a little bit of planning goes a long way, and almost anybody can plan, can encourage the rest of the team to plan out stuff. It doesn't have to be a formal process from the top down for each of these steps to happen. And of course, a lot of what I think you see from management books and disaster movies and so forth is if you stop for sometimes even just a few minutes to decide what the plan is going to be, you can make the rest of the days, weeks, or months' activities much more efficient. But you did bring up a good point that I kind of skipped over because I was talking about process instead of, say, documentation, which is they want to see something. Each, in the way that I talked about the principles and objectives being actually written out and put in the front of decks and put on the wall, each and every artifact you create to help communicate the entire design to the team, whether it's even if it's a somewhat internal one, it should actually be built as an artifact. I go into a lot more detail on this in some other presentations about design process, but it's critical that those actually exist at one level just to actually execute the design, at another very, very key level to make sure that you are collaborating correctly. So from my point of view, I developed, say, that early agnostic IA diagram, but I do that so that it's not just a feature list, but that everybody on the team, that all the implementation people and the BAs and so forth can analyze it and look at it. But it's also important, I think, as much as I don't like designing, say, comps and design the home page first and so forth, to actually build some of that to stick into a lot of these documents so that you can present things to management and they have a handle on approximately what you're doing. Getting more tactical, but so I hope I'm not boring everybody else. One of the things that I like to do first off, like that maybe even before the first kickoff meeting, but maybe right after it, is build something called a concept of design, which is a kind of visual, pretty version of a concept of operations that outlines the general intent of the whole product or program, but is often it's usually anywhere from 4 to about 8 or 10 pages. It's a simple thing that, though it's technically a design document, can be used as a presentation, as a slideshow in a meeting for either the project team or even for executive presentations so that they understand you're building something. And yes, it's important to try to get some visual designers on board so they can put pretty screens in, even if they're not final ones. So hopefully that answered the question. And looking more, so bear with me. Asmina, of course, you're free to interject if you have anything good that you're seeing.
Okay, thank you very much. Folks, if you do have questions for Stephen, we are on Q&A now. Please type those into the group chat. Send them in while he's still with us to answer them. And it looks like we just have one remaining question. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, I was just making sure, make sure that didn't comply with anything else. I'm looking at the Twitter one and so forth as well.
Okay, I'm seeing a question here. It's from Jeannie. Jeannie says, let me read it here really quick. Is there a project management tool within the Adobe Cloud Suite to make the level of planning easier, or another tool you recommend? What do your projects design in? If you could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Huh, that's an interesting one. And I'm not seeing that question, so I'll do that. I admit, although I am a Creative Cloud guy, so I actually have subscribed to it, I mostly use the tools I'm used to, just updated. I have not noticed a planning one in there. is a question that I get with some regularity from management when I go work to consult somewhere is how do you plan? And we end up a lot of times just doing terrible old things like, Microsoft Project is so harrowing to work with, we don't do that. So doing spreadsheets and cards on the wall and pieces of paper and things. To a certain degree, I think that as not a project manager, which is a whole different thing, I tend to think that you can make the plan can be a bullet list of about 6 things we're going to do, and then the design documents, much like I was just talking about, help guide that one builds the other one, so that maybe that first concept document ends up being 20% of the project plan. So it doesn't just show what we want the end user's goal to be, but it actually does address things like we think these are the platforms we're going to build for in approximately this order. And we think they're going to have these capabilities that vary by this. And we think that we're going to need these data sources. And this one might not exist. There's a lot of, like I said, I think because they're all vague and futuristic, but they start implying stuff that needs to be researched or otherwise done in some way or another in the future. That's from my point of view. But even though my role as UX tends to do that thing, it's just because I don't often see documents like this that talk about all the kind of needs and goals shared early enough on. It is possible to do simple things as dumb as write a feature list, a simpler one. I even like to do them in Google Docs, for example, so everybody can see the spreadsheet shared. But a feature list that's not dissimilar to what is going to eventually be a technical spec, but you start that as early as possible also. So it's mostly filled with very high-level features and lots of things for research. But it's a great one. Then anybody can follow up. If I didn't answer anything right, or in general, if you missed something, or if because we're at about 1 minute till the end, if I didn't answer anything, just follow up with me. I'm easy to find on the internet, or you can do, for the next few hours at least, I'll be watching the hashtag on Twitter, and we'll respond if there's any direct and easy to answer question.
Alrighty, and it looks like we have one final question, not per se technical on what you've been talking about, but folks would like to know, on your closing side, up at the top where it says Fourth Mobile, what device is that a picture of?
Those are all fake things. The first one is obviously a dumb phone. The second one's supposed to be a mobile portable gaming console, like a PSP or something. A lot of those are connected to the internet, and they have browsers and so forth on them. So it may be getting dated, but at least a year ago it seemed likely that all the tweens were going to suddenly start browsing on their portable game consoles. But I think maybe they've just gone to all using smartphones for that instead now.
Great. I'm not seeing any additional questions, so with that, Stephen, we will say a very big thank you to you for presenting such an outstanding webcast for us all. We thank all the attendees that attended today and hope you benefited. We'd also like to let you all know we did push out some codes to you in the group chat, so please open the group chat if you haven't done that yet. There's a special code in there that will save you some money today on Stephen's book. Stephen wrote a great book for O'Reilly Media, and if you like what you heard today and if you've attended his other events, you know you need to get that book. Lots of great information in there, tips, and boy, oh boy, it's going to make what you do a lot easier. Again, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude our webcast today. Goodbye, everybody.
This is Stephen. Yeah, I figured since, I put my phone number up on the slide and everything. Oh, good enough.